Hello lovely people, I'm Catherine and welcome to this week's Journal for All Seasons. I think I'm going to do a two-parter because I waved this at you on Friday, this piece that I've just started stitching on. So I thought I'd show you that more up close if you're interested. So this is my piece about the interconnectedness of woodlands between the trees and the fungal network under the forest floor. So the one side, it's double-sided, so there's no right side. But this side of it is eco-printed with leaves from the little patch of woodland here, sort of one or two of each species that I picked up on a walk one day on some vintage linen. And then the other side, like I mentioned in Friday's video, I'm not someone who dyes with mushrooms. That maybe would have been appropriate for this piece, but what I've done is I've used oak galls to get this colour, which is like an earth colour, you know, a dark brown. And then I've started stitching, just checking that it's in the right place, down a bit maybe, only using blanket stitch. So I started in the middle and I'm spiralling out, and I'm using all different coloured threads that I've naturally dyed. The blue that you see is just basting. I shall get that out when I'm done. I didn't use the invisible baste obviously because it's double-sided. So yeah, I'm really loving doing this stitch, and while I'm doing the stitch I'm watching podcasts and TED Talks about mycelial networks and learning more about them. And I referred before to Dr. Suzanne Simard's book called Finding the Mother Tree. So I refer you to that again if you want to know more about it. And on the other side of that, when you do that blanket stitching, you just get these little, I don't know if you can see against the blue of the basting, you just get these little radiating lines coming out, which kind of to me feels like sunlight through the trees. So that's the story of this piece so far. So what I thought I'd do, I now hear you asking, what has this got to do with journaling, Catherine? I've talked before about how, for me, part of self-care is to learn about things, you know, this investigating things and reading about them and listening to podcasts and all that kind of thing. I mean, I feel fine at the moment, mentally, you know, I feel perfectly fine and happy, but I guess it's part of distraction, but I think it's also, for me as well, it makes me feel more at one with the world around me if I understand it, you know, in whatever form that is, or the more I can understand it. So what I thought I'd do for my journal is a mini version of that. And why a two-parter? Because this week I want to do the stitching with you and witter on a bit about, you know, what being connected means to me and whatever else I think of. Totally unscripted, you might have noticed. And then next week, I'll just show you my next page. I thought, because I've got this big square page here, I'll mount the piece on here somehow, but because it's double-sided I might have to do something fancy, you know. I don't know exactly what yet. The obvious thing is to cut out a window or something, but who knows. So but this is all plain and needs decorating. So if I was to do that and all the stitching, either I would edit loads out, which I don't think would be very nice for you in terms of seeing the, you know, a meaningful part of the process, or the video would be hours long. So I think I'll do the stitching this week and then next week work on these pages in order to include the stitching in my journal, and at that point come up with some words somehow. So that's why a two-parter. Also, if you're not doing a journal or a self-care journal or whatever, but you like listening, I know some of you just listen to this, but you're not journaling, you just like to listen while you're stitching or whatever, maybe this will help you, inspire you with your own stitching. I'm sure if you've been here for any length of time you know this blanket stitching already if you didn't know it before, because I used it last year in my stitch journal, and we used it in the coverlet of Comfort recently. Well, I've got something else to show you, just one moment, sorry. I just wanted to show you this. This is the scroll that I made when I first moved here to kind of bond with this little patch of local woodland, and I did some of the blanket stitch here on this scroll, and the other day, yesterday, where are we? I think it's right down the other end. I did the here we are. This is also blanket stitch, but instead of staggering and, you know, doing it to make the hexagon shapes like this, I did it completely in line with each other and straight, so it made these little boxes, which I thought was really cool as well. And it kind of has got a feeling of tree bark or something, I think, which, considering this is eco print, seemed appropriate. So I outlined this leaf shape with back stitch, and then I did the blanket stitch radiating out. And I think I might go back in now, because all these little cells or spaces are inviting me to put a French knot or something in them, or a little cross, I don't know what yet. It seems to have created space that I now want to put things in. It's probably my librarian pigeonholing brain. But anyway, just to show you, you know, this and this are exactly the same stitch, both blanket stitch, but just laid in a different way. So I think I'm going to do this version on my piece for my journal, because this more represents to me anyway the interconnectedness of mycelium rather than the little cubey shapes. But I just wanted to show you that. So what I've got is I've got an offcut of the oak gall dyed linen that I'm using in the bigger piece, and I didn't have any of the other linen because I used the whole piece, but I've got this other piece of very dark eco print, and I think I'll stitch from this side my blanket stitch for a change. But I do want to baste it, even though it's only small. So I've got just some normal regular, you know, sewing thread, cotton, in this needle, pre-prepared. You probably can hear the washing machine. If it starts spinning, I'll go and close the door. But the trouble is, if I close the door, Fred, who's currently asleep on my bed, will probably realise that I've shut him out and come scratching at the door. How do cats always know when a door's closed and want to be the other side of it? I don't really need a knot. So I'm just going to baste this. I might put a couple of pins first. I'm just going to baste across, basically, I think. Technically, if you're basting larger pieces, this is a tip from quilting, if you're not a quilter, you should baste from the inside out, but I'm going to just go across diagonal to diagonal because it's only small. No, I don't need to hide the knot. So I'm just going to literally take big stitches. You know what basting is. Here's a tip as well if you're basting and you want to baste straight lines. Let me just get my thread in. Sorry, you probably can't see this thread, it was what was laying here. Let me change threads, hang on, because you can't see that, that's silly. I'll wrap that back around that later and use it somewhere else. Hopefully you can see this blue a bit better. So you can come up in one corner, and what I do then is I haven't put a knot because I'm going to pull it out, so I just leave a little tail and then go in again behind and then come forward. I think I showed something similar to this before in some other kind of stitching, but I can't exactly remember what I've pulled the tail through, but that doesn't matter. And then you can lay your thread in the direction of travel. Do you see? And then come back here and stitch alongside your thread. And you can do that if you're doing running stitch, you know, on a piece and you're worried that your lines aren't straight or whatever. I've now gone, and don't do that. I went through the loop. Make sure you stay one side of the thread, lay it down, and you can even as well, if you want to, just leave it laid down like that and not pull it right through, and take a couple more stitches. When you see women doing traditional Indian cantha quilting, you'll see they'll take loads of stitches at once, and also in sashiko they take loads of stitches at once and then pull through, as long as you don't go into your loop like I did before. So that's just, you know, hopefully I'm not through my loop anywhere. Yay! So that gives, I mean, for basting it doesn't matter obviously if it's a straight line or not, but if it did matter. So I'm going to turn, I'm going to just stitch along the edge to get to my other corner. Again, if this was a big piece, you shouldn't really stitch around the edges because you want it to be able to move outwards as you do your fancy stitching. and if you stitch around the edges it will buckle up against that edge stitching. I'm only doing this because I'm being lazy and it's only a little piece, but in general you should stitch radiating out and leave the edges, if that makes sense. So if this was a bigger piece, sorry, this is not supposed to be a video about basting, if this was a bigger piece I might stitch like I did on that piece, the 2 diagonals and there, but not these spaces in between, just leave that room to move. I hope that makes sense. So I'll just finish basting this and then get on with some actual stitching. Okie dokie. So my top piece is a bit bigger than my underside, but I'll just make sure I don't stitch right to the edge. I'm thinking now maybe I will try both kinds of blanket stitch. Where's the right one? That's not it. There it is. That I just showed you. I think I'll see how I go. I'll just see how I go. I'm wondering now about combining the two. I think I'll just start somewhere in the middle. If you want to find the middle, you can obviously fold. Whoops. And fold again. If you've done your 2 diagonal lines of basting exactly corner to corner, then obviously where they meet will be the middle. Mine more or less is, because they were more or less straight. So I'm going to just leave a little space and just come up somewhere. On my other piece I pulled my knot through, you know, I went through a little hole in the linen and then pulled the knot through. Maybe I should do that again as well. So leave a less of a tail. I made too big a knot. I know it's through. There we go. So the knot's buried. So then, if you don't know this, if you're new here, you're going to take a blanket stitch, which we're used to seeing around the edges of things, but on the surface of the cloth. So you go across and down. You kind of imagine an L shape, an upside down L. And then when you come up, you need to make sure your thread's behind the needle. So I'm going to do that in a vaguely circular fashion, and I'm not worried about my circle being perfect. If you were, you could of course draw a circle on your cloth and stitch around the edge of it. When you've got basting stitches that you're planning to take out, be careful not to pierce them with your needle when you're stitching your fancy stitching, because it will make them hard to get out, and you risk, when you're snipping at them to try and get rid of them, ask me how I know, snipping through your fancy stitching. So I'm just trying to keep away from them. So I end up with this little radiating thing. And as I'm coming back to the beginning, I'm just sort of judging the space, because I'll need another spike here, and so I'll get one spike in between, I think. And then my last one comes back up from where I started from, through that same hole. And then normally what you'd do if it wasn't double-sided, you would go shoot through to the back and then come back up at the end of one of the legs. But because it is double-sided, I'm going to go make sure my thread is over that last loop to trap it down, but then just go through just the top layer of cloth and come out at the foot of that little leg. And you can just check on the back that your needle's not right through. So this is really what I've learned about stitching something double-sided, in case that's of interest to you. So now I've got this little sun, like a child draws the sun, and then you see on the other side I've got these little radiating lines, and you see I'm not in the middle anymore, it's shifted, but I don't mind, it doesn't matter. So now where I've come out, I'm going to go under that leg with my needle. Apologies if this is all repetition for those of you who've done this before. And then I'm going to go sort of halfway between those two legs and go down, and then when I come up to do the organic-y one, this one, not the boxy one, you need to make sure that where you come up you're lower than those two legs. So then you create this, do you see, that shape, which on this first round will be a pentagon, but on subsequent rounds will be a hexagon of sorts. And then you go through that leg again, sorry I did that a bit quick, and then the same thing again. And just keep doing that all the way around. So I'll carry on doing that and try and talk about something interesting rather than tell you things you probably already know. Yeah, this idea of connection, at the risk of romanticising, like I said at the beginning, I like to learn about things, and I like sort of the natural sciences, the science of the natural world. So it's lovely to learn about things that are, what's that saying about nature being red in tooth and claw? I mean, I actually struggle to watch wildlife programmes on the television these days because I don't like to see, I know animals have to eat, carnivores have to eat meat, and I'm not, I don't want to get into any of that, but I don't like to see it. I don't like to see the trauma often. I don't know how it is in other countries with your wildlife programmes, but it seems that they're more and more, either my heart's got softer or the programmes have got more sensationalised or whatever. I don't know which it is. But yeah, so anyway, to see a programme where, I've still got cold brain, apologies, to read about something that is, if you put a certain spin on it, a symbiotic cooperative relationship, such as between plants and fungi, is more uplifting to me than reading about, lions bringing down gazelles or whatever. Lions and gazelles are both beautiful creatures, I'm not questioning that. I'm not suggesting lions should be vegans or anything like that. Absolutely not. It's just, what I like to read for my pleasure. And why I say if you put a certain spin on it, there are also people that say that the fungi are farming the trees or the plants. It's not only trees, it's all plants. But yeah, I like to think of it as symbiotic, the same as the relationship in an algae. You could say that in a lichen, that the algae or the photosynthetic bacteria. I'm going to give you my lichen talk again. I'm repeating myself. It's time to close down the channel. I'm joking. Sorry, I've come to the end, so all I'm going to do now is shoot back down through that same place. Actually, I'm not, because I'm working double-sided. I'm going to go in through that same place, and again slide my needle between the two layers of cloth, and then come out at the bottom of the neck of the nearest leg on the next round, so that it doesn't show on the other side. So I've still got those lovely little radiating lines. Now on this round, you'll see that the gaps are quite big. So again, I go under the first leg. So you could just end up having a big stitch. So you see if I stitch there somewhere, I would end up with a great big space there. But I think I might put 2 stitches in the space. So I'm going to come over a bit and then come up, trapping my thread, and then do another one, sort of, a third of the way in, like that, and then go through the loop. So you can just make decisions as you go. Do you want to have a great big space, or do you want to have, and that's now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that's now a septagon. Of course it is, because it's got that one extra thing. So you can just, you can almost audition, well, you can audition, just put your needle in and just see how big's that hole going to be if I do that like that. Or do I want to put 2? Well, maybe in this case I will put 1, and you can just vary it and play with it as you go along. Obviously, because you're radiating out, they will just get bigger and bigger. But so you can take a view, do you want the bigger stitch or do you want to put 2? Here I think I'll put 2. On the other hand, if you ended up with a scenario where the 2 stitches were small next to each other in the previous round, so I've got a little knot here, you could go under 2 legs and then make the stitch. So if if I had another stitch in here and I decided they were too small, I could go under the leg and then make the stitch, if that makes sense. I think I'll do one stitch here again. I don't think I want to alternate, I don't want it to be that regular. Although it seems to be what's happening. Now I want to do two. Yeah, so that's why I started off by saying at the risk of romanticising, because it is important, well, depends who you are and your outlook, but for me it's important not to romanticise or anthropomorphise. That's the big danger, isn't it? That we ascribe our own human characteristics to animals. Well, danger, you know. I think I'll put two there as well. But yeah, I like my stories to be, and when I say my stories, I mean, you know, when I read non-fiction about the natural world, I like to know that it's kind of true, you know. But that's, like I say, that's just me. I'm not judging anybody for having other kinds of ideas whatsoever. It resonates more to me if there's a scientific backbone to it. I'd be very interested to hear your thoughts on that, if you care to share them. So I'm coming back round to the end here. I've got one last gap where I think I'm going to take two stitches again. So I've ended up not alternating, which is what I wanted. And then same thing again, I'll turn it round, come down into that last space to close off where I came out, and then go down and come out there. I think I'll do one more round like that, and then I might try the other kind of stitch that I showed you, the more square one, and see how that looks. So under the leg, make the stitch, you get the idea. And so to me, like, I mean, I've just been this morning with Stella into the local woods here, walking around, seeing the beauty of the trees and the birds and, you know, the understory plants and everything, the lichen, the mosses, the ferns, all that. That's wonderful. But to know more, I don't know everything obviously, but to know more about what's going on behind the scenes, you know, like when I did my gardening course back in whenever it was, the 90s, one of the tutors was a very keen plantsman, and he really conveyed his love of particularly trees, and although it was a garden design course, he spent probably more time than he should with regards to the syllabus talking about deciduous trees. But I'm glad of it, because I learnt so much from him. Yeah, because not many people have gardens that they can plant deciduous trees in. You know, I'm talking about our native species, oaks and beech and so forth. But that was his passion, one of his passions. And, you know, to learn during that course about how plants photosynthesize, a bit about soil science, and, you know, all that kind of thing, the flora and fauna in the soil, you know, the little beasties in the soil that make the soil healthy or not healthy. To know about all that just makes the whole thing, to me, more beautiful and more interesting. And makes me engage with it more. I've now come to the end of my thread, so I'm going to shoot through that leg there, turn it over, and what I was doing on my other piece, excuse me, was just taking a back stitch over that. You see that little radiating stitch that's under this leg of the stitch that I shot through next to, if you follow that, and just take a little back stitch and then just go back again, but then just bury the tail in between the two layers. You could do quilter's knots and all that kind of fancy stuff, but so I've ended up with a little double stitch there, but in the grand scheme of things it's fine. If I'd gone over the top of the stitch it would have been less obvious. That is how they traditionally stop and start with sashiko. They don't make knots, they they start stitching, they leave a tail and they stitch backwards, and yeah, do a little back stitch. So I just, oh, did I mention I'm using 8-weight? This is a bit of variegated Valdani 8-weight pearl cotton I'm trying to thread through this needle. Yeah, and I'm the same with eco printing. I think, you know, that you can eco print by just learning what steps you have to follow, doing the steps, and you know you'll get good results, and that's fine, and you know that's you doing you. You're enjoying that process in that way. But I like to understand, and this is why I talk about my librarian brain, and I think that's what drew me to do library studies. I like to understand what's going on, you know, within the processes. So yeah, I think the rather dismissive term that's used is nerd, but and sometimes it's used in a dismissive way. So I need to come out there again, so I'll go onto the best thing to do is poke the needle through where you want to come out, and then look at, yeah, of course it's there by that back stitch, so I need to come out there. So I'm going to go in some distance away through a hole in this lovely fairly open weave linen, and then come out where I want to come out, and then pop my knot in, hopefully. There we go. Make sure it's secure enough. There we go. And we're off again. So these are little things, if you start stitching double-sided, that you have to think about if you don't want your knots and your tails showing. Which sometimes I don't mind, you know, I like a backstory. But for this I just wanted to maintain the pattern of the radiating lines. This is such a meditative stitch to do. I don't know what it is, something about it. Through the leg, take the little bite. Through the leg. I mean, Cretan stitch is another stitch that I like the look of, but I don't like to do it as much as I like to do this, because you have to come this way and that way, and I find coming that way quite awkward, and you find, especially on a larger piece, you have to keep turning it. This is just me. Other people might say they prefer doing Cretan stitch. We're not all the same. And yeah, the reason I chose this blanket stitch to represent, well, there's a couple of reasons, to represent the mycelial network of fungus is, one reason is that it looks like looks like a web. One of the phrases that was coined back in the 90s, 80s, 90s, I think, when Dr. Simard, S-I-M-A-R-D, was first publishing her research, was the Wood Wide Web. I think it was about the same time that the internet was being developed and coming to the public knowledge. So obviously it was a play on World Wide Web. And then the other reason for using this stitch is that it literally interlocks with itself. So it's connection, it's connective, isn't it? And then the third reason is that you get the hexagons, which are carbon, which is what all known life is based on. Right, so I've come back to the beginning again, so I'm going to go back through there and come down again through my layers and come down up to the leg there. And then I'm going to try doing the square ones and see how that looks against these. So I don't want them to be that big. I'm going to go halfway first. So now, instead of coming down with your needle below those two legs, coming out here somewhere, you want to come out so that your thread goes in a straight line. So I'm going to go down somewhere in the middle and then come up. So my needle comes up exactly between and in a straight line with those two legs. And the first time around might look a little weird. I might make little weird, well, actually I think I'm going to make little house shapes. So, oh no, I've done that wrong now. Go back, don't go through your loop. So then you take your next leg exactly below the leg of the previous round. And you could just go straight on doing that. I was in fact still then going through the leg just to, I think it connects it more. So then I could decide here, do I want to go straight under that leg or do I want to put an extra one? I don't think I need an extra one. I think I'll come straight under that leg, trap my loop in behind, but then go under the leg as well with my needle. Now here I think that's too big a jump, so I'll go halfway again. And I'm sure there are other variations you could do with it. Don't go under yet, Catherine. When you've been doing one, it's difficult to get into the rhythm of the other. Different, you know, different ways you could play with the blanket stitch to make other shapes. Maybe bears some exploration at one point. I nearly went for under the leg. I managed to stop myself. Sorry for putting my thumb in the way. I hope you can see as much as you need to see. So I'll do this one complete round like this, and then I'll come back for the next round because I think time's marching on a bit. It's quite a slow process. And I spent 10 minutes at the beginning showing you something you probably already know, also known as how to baste. Yeah, so I'll finish this round and then I'll come back when I start the next round so you can see the little box shapes forming. Okay, so I've gone right round with my first line of straight blanket stitch. So now I'm going to go round again and I'm just going to do exactly the same thing. So I'm going to go, make sure I trap that loop down, go in there and come out at the bottom of the next leg. Oops. And now this time I'm just going to simply do them in line with each other. So I go on to the next one, we'll finish that one when we come back round. So just go across to the next one and go in and out. Just normal blanket stitch and then under the leg. And if you had a much bigger gap, you know, as you radiate it out, I'd just put an extra stitch in between. Like there you could put an extra stitch in between. I don't think I will, I think I'm fine with just one. Under the leg, and you just do that all the way around. And just going under the leg really makes sure it's completely connected rather than just putting them next to each other, if that makes sense. Okay, so I'm nearly back round to the beginning. You see now I've got this little periphery of these little square boxes, and I think what I'm going to do once I just finish this round is go back to doing my more organic hexagon type shaped ones and see how that looks. And I think that's really fun to combine the two. I might even do that on my larger piece. You could just do occasional rounds of the square boxes. I have to kind of think about how that might fit into my story. That's what they call post-rationalisation, isn't it? When you do something and then later on say, oh, that tells the story because. But yeah, so I'm back to the beginning of my round of little square blanket stitches. So I do the same thing again, make sure I go over my loop, just in the top layer of cloth and come out the bottom of the first leg on the next round. And go through the leg and then do my going lower and coming up lower than those two legs to put a slant in that stitch basically. Do you see? And I hope round there where I'm far over to the side because I didn't start properly in the middle. I've got enough room to do a couple of rounds of this. That's what I'd... yeah, I think so. Down here, you can see I'm quite close to the edge here. Living on the edge. So I hope you're not getting bored with me going on about mycelial networks. I'm obviously in a deep rabbit hole. But if you weren't interested in mycelial networks, but you like this stitch, of course you could, or you could just use it because it's pretty, or you could use it to represent connections, and I often think of it as associated with comfort. In the Stitch Journal last year, that's what we associated it with, because it's blankets, and blankets are comfort. You could think of it as a honeycomb, you know, I guess there's all kinds of things you could think of it as. If you wanted to use it to tell a story with stitching that wasn't about fungal networks. I will move on at one point, I promise. I won't be going on about fungal networks forever. But a couple of you did express interest when I showed you the cloth on Friday. So you've only got yourselves to blame. It's not really fair, is it? 2 people were interested and there's, I don't know how many of you watching. The rest of you have to listen as well. But yes, I think I did mention a couple of weeks ago in the journaling video that I might get back to stitch journaling. And obviously I am. But like I said, next week I want to do something to the pages to kind of combine the stitch journaling aspect of it with the mixed media journaling aspect of it. So I just have to come up with what exactly. I have some vague notions, but yeah. So I'll finish this round, I think, and do another round, and then I'll be back to show you the finished stitch. Okay, so I'm just coming round to the end of my second round, so I'm going to go through to the back, through where I came out, and finish off. And I think I can get my basting out. The other thing that I wanted to just mention is today, the 1st of September, is the anniversary of my dad's passing, 6 years ago today. So comfort is, yeah, it's a big thing for me today. I'm going to go and sit and work on his quilt that I made with his shirts and hankies, called the Crumbs of Comfort cloth, a little bit. And yeah, and just think about him. So let's get the basting out and then take a view on whether I'm going to do something in those little square boxy shapes. There we go. So I can wind that back on there and use that again. So yeah, like I said, I'm slightly off centre. If you look on the back, see I'm slightly off centre there. I'll see next week when I come to put it in the journal. I'm not going to cut anything off now or try and square it up or anything, because I don't yet know where I'm going with it. I'm just thinking I might do some little French knots in those spaces. I don't think I want to do it with this thick thread, or do I? What have I got in here? Got 2 strands of creamy, maybe I'll use that since it's in there. 2 strands of sort of creamy tan embroidery floss. So now the challenge will be, because French knots when you jump from space to space make a big stitch, and I'm apparently worrying, or not worrying, but concerning myself with how it looks on the back, because I like the look of those radiating stitches. So I want to come there. So I'll go a little bit away and bury my knot. Actually, since I'm near the edge, I can probably come in from the edge and bury my knot, which I could have done equally from the other side, but anyway. And then come out in the centre of that little thing. Make sure I'm in the middle. So what I'm going to do here is make my French knot so I get the tail where it's coming out. I think I'll just do 2 wraps because it's 2 strands, so that will equal 4 lots of thread. That makes sense. and then I'm going to go back in next to where I came out, and then make sure my needle is only through the first layer of cloth, and then come back up ready in the next space, snug my thread up around my needle and pull through. And that way, if I haven't gone through where I shouldn't, you won't see anything on the back at all. So just repeat that. 1, 2, go in just next to where you're coming out, but make sure you're only picking up the top layer of cloth. Snug it up and pull through. And I'm going to do that all the way around. Okay, so that's done. This is the other side with the radiating stitches. So you see where I did the more boxy blanket stitches, obviously the stitches are close together in lines, and then when I was doing the more organic ones they're more spread out. But I still think it's cool on the other side. And then here's the side that I stitched from. I don't mind actually that it's offset, but I hope you can see. So yeah, I really think it's kind of representing connection and comfort, and connection in whatever way you want to interpret that. It doesn't have to be about the mycelium, and comfort because of the blanket stitching. But I think while I was doing the little French knots, I was thinking about the knots and how they're kind of holding together little individual bunches of thread, rather than, you know, in contrast to the threads that are radiating out, and then they're encased in these little boxes for safety, you could say, I guess. I've talked before, or I did a piece of work some years ago that is sold now, called Everything's Connected to Everything Else, which you see that connections for me is an ongoing theme. And there I talked about circles, and I think I've talked about it here, circles as well. They can be something that encloses and gives a feeling of safety to those within the circle. We talk about, don't we, in the inner circle, but they can also be excluding things that are outside the circle. And so there's that duality about them, and I think there's maybe that same duality about these little boxes with the French knots in. Anyway, something to think about. So I hope you enjoyed stitching that. If you have a go, I very much think I am going to combine the more square blanket stitching in my larger piece. So this has been great. This has been almost like a little test piece, and possibly include some French knots or maybe other stitches in the spaces as well. And you see the way I did those French knots, you can't see anything of it on the back. Just very tiny little back stitches here where I had to change my thread, but you know, not disturbing at all. And if you really didn't want that, you could do a quilter's knot and pop it under the surface. So there we go. So, and next week I'll come up with a way to put it in the journal. So all that leaves for me to say is thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and happy stitching, happy journaling, happy whatever, and I'll see you next time. If you're a coverlet of comforter, Wednesday is the first video of September, so there'll be a new prompt. I'm really looking forward to sharing that with you. And Friday's video, I'm going to use my nettle dyed cloth I showed you and talked about a few weeks ago, and make some kind of pouch with you, some kind of sewing pouch. I know I have got a very early video back when I first started my channel doing a collage one, but this will be a little bit different. Sorry, I think that's the post coming and Stella barking. Shush, shush, shush. Let me just say goodbye to the people. So that's coming up on Friday. Stells, stop. She's a good girl. It's just the post, nobody's knocking. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to you joining me next time for more cloth and journaling and whittering tales. Bye bye, lots of love and kisses. Bye bye.